As a child, I was very isolated. I was having a hard time integrating to the educational system. I was highly dyslexic. It was not diagnosed. I felt alone. I felt misunderstood. I didn't have many friends. And although it was pretty painful for me to feel that way, at the same time, it gave me the leisure to really kind of commute with nature and asking fundamental questions. I had a lot of time to contemplate. I would be looking at the flowers and the bees and the trees, and how is it that it all knows what to do? How is it that it developed in this highly complex, interconnected, interdependent structure out of a universe that's supposedly the result of an explosion with random functions and so on. So to me, there was a great mystery, and I wanted to know how it all worked. I had a hard time with my education early on because I didn't fit in. And as soon as I could, legally, I left school and I became a ski coach and ski instructor. And I was in the ski industry for almost 20 years. And I spent a lot of time observing nature, all the snowflakes and all the geometry, the crystals in the stone as I climbed the mountains and so on. And when I started to do physics full time, I had a choice to try to go to university and get a standard education and get a PhD in physics. But that wasn't my goal. I was just curious about the nature of reality. And I wanted to have the flexibility to think my own thoughts, to learn my own data without the authority and the duties that comes in working inside, the educational system. So I studied independently for many, many years. I isolated myself into a van for 5 years and studied very, very intensely, 15, 20 hours a day. And then eventually I connected with other physicists, and I was educated by these physicists like Dr. Rauscher and others. And this is how my education came about. So one of the problems with the current educational system is that it strongly segregates between the various fields, like from physics to biology or from biology to philosophy and so on. But it all works together. The universe doesn't make these distinctions. It doesn't go, oh, this is physics and this is biology and it's not related. It doesn't say this is astrophysics and this is quantum physics and they're not related. Like, if we don't see the relationship, it's because we haven't dug deep enough. We haven't understood. But certainly, it's all one thing, and we need to treat it that way. Intuitively, from when I was very young, I had this instinctive notion that there must be something that's connecting everything. Now, that might sound like a crazy idea for most people, but think about it. The space between you and me right now is full of electromagnetic fields. It's full of like infrared, microwave, background radiation from the galaxy, from the universe. I mean, it's got all kinds of electromagnetic fluctuation in the space, radio waves with all kinds of radio stations. We don't know they're there. We think of the space between you and me as empty, but we know it's full of electromagnetic fluctuation. And then eventually, in the physics I wrote, I realized, yes, there is electromagnetic fluctuations that are occurring at such a high frequency, at such a granular level, billions of times smaller than the atom, that we have not realized it's there. Although it's kind of been there in the physics here and there, like it used to call the ether, now it's called vacuum fluctuations. Almost for 100 years, it's been known that the vacuum of quantum space, meaning the space inside the atom is 99.9999% space, the space between atoms. Some of the densest molecule, like carbon, like diamond, if you grew one of the atom in that molecule, so it's an orange, the other orange would be 2 football fields away, right? So there's a lot of space. we know that that space is not empty. Space at the quantum scale is actually fluctuating with a massive amount of energy. But it's not just beyond our senses, it's beyond our measuring capability of our equipment. So, in general, since it's so far removed from our experience, although the physics said yes, it's there, in general, it was completely ignored. It was assumed that it was just stochastic fluctuations that are random and they all cancel out and you can ignore it. And what I'm proving, and now other physicists like Frank Wilczek, which has a Nobel Prize in physics, is starting to talk about it in an amazing conference that he gave in 2017 called The Materiality of the Vacuum. People start to realize that, yeah, it's stochastic, yeah, it's chaotic, but where it's not chaotic, we call it matter. That is, matter and the physical universe is actually built from that field. It's like we were fish in the water, but we didn't know that the water was there. And other physicists are finally coming to realize that this could be what unifies all of physics and that it's critical that we understand this field that's everywhere. So how does the vacuum create matter? Well, you can imagine the vacuum structure, the fluctuation of the vacuum, the grains of the vacuum being really, really small, billions of times smaller than an atom, acting like a fluid. Just like water, it appears like a liquid. And when you pull the plug in your bath, it appears to curve and spin, and it appears like continuous. You know, when you look at water really close, that it's made of particles we call atoms. So think about these vacuum fluctuations as particles at the Planck scales that make up a fluid. And then imagine that where the fluid is spinning, making little vortices, like the water going down the drain, that region where all the molecules are co-moving and it's coherent in that region, we call that matter. And the part away from that, in the back of the bath, that's less coherent, oscillating more chaotically, that we call space. So then, when the vacuum organizes and spins, it's going to start orbiting just like gravity, and so it curves, and where it curves like this really strongly in space-time, we see what we call mass, gravitational mass, right? We see a denser part of the vacuum, and we call it matter. And it connects everything because this liquid is everywhere. It makes up all the matter. So everything that goes into this fluid and everything that comes back out into the matter is continuously informing each other. So I find it a little strange on this planet that we all think that there's not enough energy and that we fight for it and we have wars for it and all this stuff. Because when you calculate the amount of energy in this field, in this vacuum fluctuation field at the quantum level, it's enormous. It's like 10 to the 93 grams per centimeter cube. 10 to the 93 grams is a very large number. To give you an idea, the universe is a very large universe. Galaxies are already immense. They have billions and billions of stars. Our solar system in our galaxy doesn't even show up. If you're looking outside the galaxy at our galaxy, you wouldn't see our sun. It's too small. The universe is huge. So imagine an energy density in a centimeter cube of space that's 10 to the 93 grams per centimeter cube. That is 39 orders of magnitude larger than the mass of the universe. The mass of the universe is 10 to the 55 approximately. So if we could extract 1/1000th of a percent of the energy that's in a centimeter cube of space in terms of quantum fluctuations, we could run the world for thousands and thousands of years. The study of consciousness is taking a huge turn in the last decade, 20 years ago when I was presenting in physics conference, there was one word that was taboo. You could say the F word all you want, but if you said the C word, then there's a good chance you would get kicked out. If you started to talk about consciousness, then they thought you were flaky, you were not doing real physics, consciousness. I was even told by one physicist that their equation is better because it didn't require consciousness. I asked him if he realized he just insulted himself because obviously consciousness wrote the equation. So it was kind of difficult at the time. You only could talk about consciousness in dark alleys, in the back of the laboratory. But clearly, the fact that we became self-aware is part of the development of the natural world. So how did that happen? And is that truly located in the brain? Which is an error that's done by most brain scientists and so on. They think that the electrical exchange they see in the brain is equal to consciousness. But if you go deeper at the quantum level, you start to go, well, wait, the exchange of information would be with the vacuum, with the structure of the vacuum. So consciousness is not in the brain, consciousness is in the space, and what the brain is doing is it's translating the information in the space to something that we observe as chemical exchange and electrical exchange and so on. These are the result, not the source. So the analogy is different. The brain and the body as a whole, most likely, including all the connective tissues and the bones and all this, act like an antenna, a highly tuned antenna that's picking up information at the quantum scale from a field of information that has what we call consciousness in it. So it's information that you're acquiring and it's information that you're sending back into the field. And as a result, you have a feedback. And when the feedback of information in the vacuum, because remember now, the atoms, the physics of your body is made out of the space. And so the space is exchanging with these atoms. And so now you have this feedback. When the feedback has a high enough rate and the complexity is high enough, then all of a sudden the system becomes self-aware. And we call that consciousness, self-awareness. So instead of thinking of you being separated from the universe and somehow manufacturing this epiphenomena we call consciousness, I think it's more accurate to see yourself as part of this field of information, part of this connection to all things, and you contributing to this field, you feeding information back and forth between this field is what you're actually describing as self-awareness or consciousness. It's literally the universe learning about itself. This fluid acts like a hologram. And in a hologram, every point contains all the information of the whole. So all humans are connected to all the information in the universe. If this is true, theoretically, we have all the information available. However, we have to access it. Through history, I think a lot of people figured this out. I mean, all knowledge is within God, or all the universe is present in every point, and that by going inward, we have access to the information. I mean, that's generally the message that was given by all the great masters. It's like an equation. Know yourself and you will know the universe. It's not just philosophical concept, but it's actually the way the physical world exists. It's exchanging information across huge distances through this superfluid dynamics of space-time. And by the way, this is why things can become entangled. That's why, entanglement has been measured in laboratory, and we know now that particles can be entangled, and it doesn't matter how far they are from each other. They can be across the universe from each other. If they're entangled, you tickle this one, the other one is laughing. It's kind of like magical. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. Now we're starting to understand the mechanism that makes that possible. When Einstein wrote general relativity, it was thought that it was no longer necessary to have the ether, so it was removed there and replaced by space-time. Yet, space-time in general relativity, which is thought to be the structure of space that's curving to create gravity, has never been described, meaning it's great. Okay, you got this surface that's curving to produce gravity, but what is it made of? Clearly, it has some materiality since it's producing a gravitational effect. It's doing something, but what is it made of? So you have nothing in relativity that explains what space-time is made of. And that's what we are discovering now. This is what I've discovered early on, is that space-time is made of quantum fluctuations in the vacuum structure. This is actually what the equation says. And I just want to clarify that these equations are not just nice. They don't just, look good or philosophically give interesting result. They predict things that are very, very specific. They predict forces, they predict radiuses, masses, the proton, the electron. Now we've solved for the universe, the background radiation, the temperature of the universe. All this stuff comes out really, really clean, very, very precise. Actually made a prediction of the radius of the proton, before it was measured more accurately, and it nails it within, the margin of error of the experiment, where the standard model is off by 4%, which is huge in quantum theory. So it really is doing the job. And certainly, like I was saying earlier, some of the greatest physicists on the planet are coming to that view as well. They're realizing the vacuum is a real thing. We have to pay attention to this energy. There's many other physicists that are starting to talk about black holes, similarly that I have, talking about them being subatomic particles, that entanglement between subatomic particles are the result of micro wormholes that connects the particles. So all this is starting to emerge, and is the fine edge of physics. So of course, it's not in the books yet. It's in papers, it's in very advanced thinking, it's at the bleeding edge of physics, but that's where we're going, because there's a lot of stuff that's in the books that's turning out to not be quite accurate. Just like gravity from Newton was somewhat good, but when Einstein came along, then it's like gravity is a little more than what Newton described. It's a little different than what Newton described. So, there's changes that happens in science, and it takes time for those changes to be accepted and understood. Every time somebody in history has come up with something drastically different, like the Earth is not the center of the solar system, the sun is in the middle, it was very obvious that we were the center and the sun was going around us and that the planets were going around us as well. So, like, to say it wasn't that was like, oh my God, what is he thinking? Is he insane? Right? But then, when we put the sun in the middle, all of a sudden everything became much more simple, everything became more precise, but they've encountered violent opposition, and I did too, certainly did. It's difficult. Over the last 30 years of doing this, it's got easier. There's less and less people saying it's impossible what you're saying. There's less and less people. Of course, I've refined it. I've written many papers. The papers are in peer-reviewed journals. The last one was published at Physics Essay. The math has got stronger. We have more and more proof. No, this is really the way it is. But of course, there's always an opposition to new ideas. It's difficult. It takes time, to move a whole civilization from going in one direction to like start moving it in another direction. Our current way of using technology is very rudimentary. You gotta realize we only a civilization of advanced technology of about 150 years. I mean, 150 years ago, your ancestors and my ancestors were going around on horseback, and the concept that something metallic could fly was completely outside their consciousness. We've gone a long ways in 150 years, but it's very rudimentary. The idea that we're basically burning fossilized dinosaur juice to power our rocket and our cars, and we're releasing all this stuff in the atmosphere, and it's just a serious mess. And I think we're arriving at these alternatives now where if the vacuum fluctuations are the source of matter, as more and more people are starting to understand, then the technologies that come out of that are remarkable. You can imagine all of a sudden realizing that there's a source of energy that we didn't know was there, that's huge, and that we can tap into. But more importantly, is that realizing that this energy, when it circulates in the right geometry, produce curvature of space-time, produce gravity. It leads directly to gravity control, which I believe is the next step in the evolution of humanity. It's a step, I think, actually, that was predicted by many ancient civilizations. They called it the moment where humanity would ascend. Most people interpret that as like some philosophical, spiritual ascension. It might be that, but I think it's actually describing a very more important moment, which is related to us having the consciousness to be able to develop it, but a moment where we literally learn to control gravity so that we have vehicles that can literally levitate themselves into space, and we can start to colonize space and not necessarily live on the surface of a planet, which is limited in its resources and limits our capacity to survive. So it's amazing what's coming down the pipe from these new understanding in theory, and it's going to change our world very fundamentally. It's not about leaving Earth and polluting other parts of the universe with our carbon-based technology, right? It's actually learning that there's a way to become harmonious with nature using the same energy that nature uses everywhere in the universe, and just becoming part of the will works of the universe instead of destroying matter to produce the effects that we want. There's a way to extract energy prior to this energy being matter, extract fundamental energy of creation and direct it to power our devices. And you might say, well, are we destroying the universe that way? No, because as we use the energy, it goes back into the vacuum and it's just being recycled. It's like the recycling structure of nature, and we see it in nature everywhere. The trees fall down, they make dirt, they make nutrients for other trees to grow that fall down and make more nutrients. It's a continuous flow of feedback, feed-forward loop that we call recycling, basically, and that can be applied to our energy needs and technological needs. This is a good question. Are we wise enough to get this level of technology? I think that the world is changing very rapidly. I think people are kind of waking up to like, we want to do something different than this continuous destruction. I think more and more people know that the generations of our children will not have an earth to inhabit if we continue to do the things we've been doing. So I believe we're getting to this place where we have the wisdom to have this kind of power. We are in a race against the clock. We're at the 11.9 hour, and we have to really show up. This is why I spend time talking to the public and all these other people around the world that are waking up or like doing all these world meditation and the amazing work that's done by so many others. Wake up. It's not acceptable anymore to pollute your body with food that's not healthy for you, to pollute the world around you by just throwing your stuff out. People are reaching this level of awareness, and I think this technology that's going to emerge is going to help people realize, wow, we're all connected, right? Whatever I do influence the rest of the world, not only the world, the universe. So this technology, these theories that are emerging is going to help people realize, yeah, it's all connected. And when I act a certain way, when I do certain things, I have an influence on the world. So I'm hoping we're going to beat the clock and reach the level of consciousness that's required for us to have this level of technology. I think we're right there on the cusp. We're experiencing a fundamental existential crisis. People don't know why they're here. They're looking everywhere. And yet, if they just looked inward just a little bit, they would find a wealth, an amazing wealth of information, an amazing wealth of energy, of love, of support, of connection with the universe. And that's really what's missing in people's life right now. You wake up, the first thing you do is you grab your phone, and then you're off and running. In my case, I'm crazy busy. I'm running 3 companies. I have 2 kids, and I'm a single dad 50% of the time. And, so it's like, it's intense. But inside that intensity, inside that window, I have to create for myself oasis so that I can go back to center, so that I can go back to myself. You just need a few minutes, like 30 minutes a day, just to bring you back to what's real, what's important, and what is critical. You get signals. It's like you're tuning in to the radio station of you. And then you might get guidance, you might get a sense of what you should do next and how you should think about it. And, it can be quite informative. It can be very profound in actually being able to help guide you and hear the universe talking through you. Otherwise, you might completely miss it. And when you go through your day and get stuck in the spin of the world, with cars cutting you off on the highway, getting late to work, your boss getting upset, all this stuff, and everything starts spinning out of control. If you've gone to your center, if you know where your center is, if you've gone to that place where you connect with the universe within yourself, in each one of your atoms, then you can go back there very easily. Now, one thing that's dangerous is to start to concentrate on all the bad things that are happening in the world, conspiracy and all this stuff, and get lost in the negativity of this world. It's important to be aware of the situation. I'm not saying you should become oblivious to all the terrible thing that happens in this world, but it's important as well to concentrate on the solutions, because there's a lot of solutions out there, to concentrate on the positive part, to concentrate on the possibility of the true ascension of our world. It's right there. It's so close. And we just need so much more support from everybody to support the solutions that more and more people are bringing forward in the financial structure, in the political structure, in everybody's lives, what they think about, and participate in things that are bringing positive solution to the world. There's a lot of positivity. There's a lot of love. There's a lot of people awakening. And, that is what we want to help and support. And the negative stuff is going to work itself out if we just concentrate on the positive outcome. At the end of your life, when you're in the deathbed and you got like a few days to live, what's gonna matter is the connections you made. The connections you made, the love you generated, the love you produced, the connection to the universe, to yourself, to people around you that you were able to explore. Who are we? That is a very deep and profound question. We are the universe experiencing ourselves. We are the flower opening, the tree growing. We are the natural world in harmony. We are the infinite of the universe contained into the finite structure of our being. We are an amazing, transformative expression of the universe from a very specific coordinates in space-time. That is, no one else in the universe, nothing else in the universe sees the universe from your specific angle. If I hold an object in front of you, you will see one side, I will see the other side, another person will see another side. Nobody's gonna see the same thing, right? So we are actually feeding very important specific information about our angle of observation to the universe. And so be that miracle. You realize the miracle you are. 100 trillion cells continuously plotting and organizing to make you healthy. You are a miracle. And to remember that every day is super important. It's critical.